So, in the previous lecture, I was talking about the digital humanities as not being only digital archives and digitization of archives, but I was pointing towards the need to look at digital culture, and I also kind of approached the argument from the point that the understanding of the archive itself is governed by the way by the digital technologies, really, which are used to create the archive. So coming to the broader question of digital cultures and the digital as such, I have a few kind of topics that I'm going to cover. Digital culture itself is a very broad area, and the one thing to start with is the related topic of technology and culture. And I kind of feel comfortable in looking at culture as mediated by technicity. And by technicity, I understand how techne, art, or any artifice, is involved in the creation of the cultural artifacts. Such culture itself is a techne. Right? Pencil itself is a machine. From that very broad kind of point of view, I would like to look at a few elements of the digital cultures. So, when I talk about mapping, I try to think of how to map the digital humanities. Where is the digital humanities? As I've said in the earlier lecture, it's not just digital English literature. So what is it? I'm just going to talk about two stories of impact, that I kind of call stories of impact. And one of this is the story of Inspector Bill Knopp of the Leicestershire Constabulary. He was a participant in the Amplified Leicester program, and he used Twitter to reduce the impact of rumours and dispel fears among the Leicester populace when the English Defence League demonstration threatened to get out of control. As he says, our tweets were getting sent on and on and on, and they reached 50,000 people. So imagine this. So you have a political rally by an ultra-right wing group which is aimed at kind of disrupting life in Leicester. What they do is they gather at a particular place and they're going to bash some shops up. What the police do is they tweet exactly where they're gathering, so nobody goes there. Right. So it's kind of Tahrir Square in reverse. Right. So this is something we need to kind of think about when we're looking at kind of digital cultures. Really, and there is a cultural, socio-cultural impact here, a huge impact really, which is mediated by the digital. It wouldn't have been possible to do this. It's not old words, new tools, and that's simply as that. So tell you the story of Joy Marston, whose very different story. She says that she was extremely diffident, and the events that she's put up now on about her business on Facebook and LinkedIn have increased her confidence levels in using social media and helped change the way in which she works by showing her how to challenge the status quo and making her more visible to her networks. I mean, thinking of it in one way, you might think this is simple. There's nothing great about it. But believe me, I mean, Joy, when she spoke to me, she did kind of make it very clear that she was just getting nowhere with her business. So what I'm saying here is that social media has kind of made a very significant impact, really, and I mean, you don't need movies like The Social Network to tell you so. What is most interesting for me is perhaps, which is what I work on myself, is video games as a storytelling media. So Barry Atkins, theorist of video games, says that one day perhaps the computer game will even produce its à la recherche de temps perdu, or its Ulysses, its Casablanca, or its Citizen Kane. It is as yet early days, and this is the reading of this early days true. So, but there is this potential of kind of creating these kinds of narratives using, well, media, which is digital media. Andrew McTavish in Companion to Digital Literary Studies says that to date the most common debates have been between ludological approaches, which define digital games as primarily rule-based objects and activities, and a collection of other approaches rooted in the study of narrative, theatre and film. For many ludologists, remove the storyline and high-tech special effects and you still have a game based upon rules. While this may be true, the fact remains that many digital games include stories, performance and audiovisual pleasures that are configurable by the player in some fashion. Remove them from the game and you might still have a game, but it won't be the same one that you started with. So, Atkins's book is called More Than a Game, one of his books, his first book on video games, I think. And video games are certainly more than just a game, or more than just a story. The digital also plays kind of a very important part really in understanding this new form of narrative. So here are my axioms for video game studies. A. Some video games tell stories. B. Stories are different. We read, write and play them. So as we read them, we write the stories into existence and we play them. They raise questions about identity, telos, endings that is, narratives, involvement, virtuality and many other issues that are key to the humanities. These are all issues that are very important for philosophical discussions, for discussions of being human, of humanities, identity, narratives, involvement, endings. Traditional humanities struggles to analyze them. The traditional humanities, subjects would struggle with something like a video game because of its multiplicity. But video games are here to stay. So I'm just kind of going to show you a couple of slides, or maybe just talk about them really. There's this game called Assassin's Creed 2. You play the character of the son of a banker, Ezio Auditore, and you get embroiled in the controversies around in Renaissance Italy, travel from Florence to Venice to Rome, fighting against the Borgias and getting kind of involved in all kinds of very dubious plots. You see, the very playing of the game, you're telling yourself a story. You're telling yourself a story, you're telling others a story, you're telling a story into existence. When we're talking about the video game story, there are also kind of other interesting things, other interesting offshoots of this, interesting for me. So I'm looking at all of these, and the other part I wanted to also talk about, there are so many different tools out there for humanities research, for research. Tools like Zotero, which helps you make your bibliography in seconds. Then Ngrams, which I spoke about earlier, mind mapping software, concordance software, Poll Everywhere, which lets you do kind of polls, online polls on the fly. So actually reinforms the understanding of research, of humanities research, of the culture of humanities research. I mentioned data mining in terms of archival research, but think of it this way. When you do qualitative data analysis, when you analyze interviews, you can do this in two ways. In quantitative methods, you just do like surveys and you get like a 1, 2, 3, 4 Likert scale response, or yes, no response, or whatever, and then you run kind of statistical software. But what if you were interviewing in depth for the narratives, for the stories of people? What if your respondent tells you a lot about himself or herself, which you also want to record, want to capture in terms of some kind of analyzable terms. We have qualitative data analysis software which allows you to mark up interviews with tags and then digitally analyze them. Right. So that's again bringing the kind of the so-called analog conversation into digitally trackable kind of into a digitally trackable sphere. Just tag with metadata, and then kind of you can analyze. So this is another aspect I see of understanding culture digitally. Also, the entire idea of digital culture, digital humanities, is deeply connected with code. I am one of the people who believes that some knowledge of coding is essential when you're dealing with a digital artifact, or at least the knowledge that the digital artifact is in code, whether it is XML, whether it is what have you, is essential, because the code it informs the digitality, it informs the text, instead of just the text existing per se. Yes, the writing on pen and paper and then kind of print is also informed by a technicity, is also informed by even a technical element. Likewise, code is the reality behind behind a digital text. I think digital pedagogy changes the game quite a lot. Earlier we used to have the humanities scholar writing one paper at a time alone, but it's now possible with the digital humanities to collaborate. Collaboration is big, is huge. It's kind of really easy now, and it's also easy to highlight the work not merely of yourselves but of your students, of people who work with you, and I think that's extremely important, because and that is something that digital humanities facilitates. The other element I think which is very important, which is digital, is that it is easier to approach paratexts, texts around the obvious text, right, which actually create the context, which inform the context, which also give you much more than you could have perhaps had merely reading the text. So think of yourselves reading Virginia Woolf's diaries around the time when she wrote To the Lighthouse, reading the newspapers that she must have read, or looking at maybe a pencil case that she used which had a certain photo, which I'm just kind of I'm not a Virginia Woolf scholar, but so it's possible to bring them together in the digital medium, right? Also, my last point, which is media-specific analysis, which is a point made by Catherine N. Hales, where Hales speaks of the medium being extremely important in the analysis. I think I mentioned some of it briefly. So, Hales says that complementing the foundational concepts of material metaphors, inscription technologies, and technotexts is a kind of criticism that pays attention to the material apparatus producing the literary work as a physical artifact. So, the material apparatus producing the literary work as a physical artifact. And that becomes more and more obvious in the digital, right? Where perhaps you might not be as conscious of the type of paper used in printing your copy of Robinson Crusoe, and I hope you'll be conscious of the font really, or the binding. With the digital artifact, it is difficult to deny that there is code behind it, right? The mediality of the artifact is kind of just so much there, especially if you're going for a hypertext or something like that. So I will end with talking about, just have a small quote for you. 100 years ago, our body of knowledge doubled once every century. Today our body of knowledge doubles every few years. In our digitized microchipped world, there is virtually no subject that cannot be Googled, downloaded and consumed. In higher education, the challenge is clear. How can we analyze and apply that information in ways that will help our learning institutions thrive? How do we turn that ubiquitous cloud of information into real knowledge? Now, I'm not interested in real knowledge or absolute kind of subjects, things like no subject that cannot be Googled, downloaded or consumed. But there is some point in what is said here, which is that instead of, this is what I call the model from the tower to the cloud. From the ivory tower where knowledge was kind of concentrated at one point, it is now kind of gone above, perhaps down to the cloud where it disseminates kind of in more ways than one. Right? And well, obviously one needs to be kind of careful when we talk about the cloud and this ubiquitous knowledge and this entire kind of dream of the digital needs to be qualified, and people need to be educated more, need to engage more with the idea of the digital and digital cultures, as well as the idea of digital archiving. Because I don't think digital humanities is something that people really understand yet, and I think this is a step that we need to take, especially in India, where although we have a huge digital presence in, I shouldn't say this word, but outsourcing, and also there is an impression in the world over that there is a big digital kind of input from India. I can count on my fingers how many digital humanities courses there are in India, and how many of them run really, and how many digital humanities projects there are. You might know the South Asian Digital Humanities Project, the SAD, which is run by Padmini Ray Murray, Vinayak Dasgupta and myself, which is trying to get together these projects on one website, but the number is like really small. And there is also the need to make stakeholders, administrators aware of the impact of digital humanities, the impact of the digital on culture, and that I think should be one of the aims of digital humanities in India. We need to have a deeper kind of understanding, perhaps, of digital cultures. I think that for me sums up digital humanities in the two sections that I was dealing with, digital archives and digital cultures.